We stand at a perilous moment in our fight against climate change. Global leaders are converging in Glasgow, Scotland for a major UN climate conference known as COP26. The commitment shown by world leaders at this conference and the actions taken by individual countries could well determine the fate of our planet and the billions of people and species who call it home. Governments won't be acting alone. At Glasgow, we will see representatives from every sector of society, and every sector has a role to play, and most particularly the business sector. Simply put, we need to cut global emissions in half by 2030, and we can't get there without the private sector and the innovation and the capital and the partnerships that they bring to this challenge. So, welcome to Companies for Climate Action, a series of conversations between World Wildlife Fund and some of the world's top business leaders about the urgent need to solve the climate crisis. We hope this series sends a clear signal that business leaders are putting skin in the game to slash emissions at a scale that matters, and more importantly, that they are demanding commitments at COP26 and here at home in the United States that put our planet on a path to a livable future. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, and welcome to today's conversation. I'm Carter Roberts from World Wildlife Fund, and joining me today for our conversation is Ramon Laguarta, Chairman and CEO of PepsiCo. Ramon, welcome.
Good morning, Carter. How are you?
As CEO of PepsiCo, why does a stable climate and intact nature matter to the institution you lead?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carter. Listen, it's probably one of the best kept secrets, but we are by nature an agriculture company by essence. No, we grow. I think it's 24 crops in 60 countries, from tomato, peppers, oats, oranges, obviously corn, wheat. So for us, having reliable supply of all these agriculture inputs is critical for the way the company operates, and that's critical for us. Then on top of that, obviously, we're seeing consumers starting to realize that and prefer with the purchases brands that are contributing positively to society in certain areas. And so clearly our brands want to be in that space. We're seeing our customers move in that direction. And most importantly, our associates. I mean, and there is really a war for talent, and we're able to engage our people, and we're able to, give them, for them the maximum they can by working for a company that has a positive impact in society. So all those are very important elements. And that's why we decided to, a few weeks ago, launch Pep Positive, which is clearly an end-to-end transformation of our company, what we do, how we do it, in a way that we can continue to be a very successful company operating within planetary boundaries. So those are, critical elements why this company, if we want to be successful 20 years from now, we really need to embrace the transforming ourselves and having the planet more at the center of how we create value.
Great. One thing I've always said is, even though parts of the environmental movement demonize companies, we all know companies are not only create jobs and provide goods to the public, but they're full of good people who don't just want to make a living. They also want to be part of solutions across the planet, whether it's health and human services or poverty or the environment and climate change. One thing I've learned about our own employees at WWF is they examine very carefully whether or not your actions match your rhetoric. It is a constant filter and screen. And one of the things that PepsiCo has done, in addition to all the other corporate leaders that we are talking to in the series, is you've committed to science-based targets, which are the coin of the realm for what it means to have integrity and how you get after climate change and reducing your emissions. And for those who are not familiar, science-based targets show companies how much and how quickly they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in order to align with the Paris Agreement's goals. Some of that is easier than other parts. And at the beginning of this year, Pepsi really doubled down on its science-based targets, pledging to reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 75% and value chain emissions by 40% by 2030 to achieve net zero by 2040. So your reduction target is now consistent with a 1.5 degree warming future, which is, again, the gold standard. As I said, some of this is easier than other parts of reaching those goals. What have you learned about PepsiCo through the process of setting even more ambitious science-based targets and your commitment to net zero?
Yeah, Carter, I think it's been a great process. We obviously, as you said, we signed for science-based targets for climate some time ago. It has given us the rigor, the discipline, the granularity that we need to make all this happen, right? So as we land all these big corporate commitments into operational targets for our different teams, this has been a process of as I said, granularity and rigor that allows us to be much more operationally effective. So it's been a great process. Now we're in the process as well to have science-based targets for water reduction, water being and I think we're one of the first that are working to get those targets in place. Water is critical for us. Obviously, we operate across the world, and we need water for our operations. So we're very committed to also being net positive water by 2030. So we want to understand the watersheds, and we want to understand how we can give water back to the communities, obviously reducing our own consumption. But one of the things that we've learned through this process is that we want to be a successful company, a company that continues to grow and continues to be preferred by consumers. And we need to decouple that growth from the use of fossil fuels. I mean, there's no way we can continue with our growth strategy without decoupling. And that is something that was not so clear to some of our people, even to some of the leaders. So how do we redefine our packaging? How do we redefine our energy in our factories? How do we create new ways of transportation, new consumption models like SodaStream, that eliminate a lot of the transportation, the carrying water around, plastics. So all this has been very positive to our people. We've used this to democratize the knowledge across the company and making sure that we go from what is an idea or an aspiration into very clear operating targets for the different layers of the organization, the different people, creating accountability. This has been a great process for us, one that we want to continue, as I said, for water and hopefully for other resources as well in the future.
So I think all that's great, and I see that you are flying the flag this morning with the pullover that you're wearing. One thing I've learned about working with companies who are genius at marketing, they're also genius at communicating and engaging their staff in ways that make these commitments pop. And so you've got the Pep Plus logo.
I agree with you. When we are 300,000 people, like we are, it's important that the leadership aspires for big transformation, and I think that's what we're doing. But the most important thing is to take the rest of the organization with you, and as they leave their jobs every day, that they really understand how they're contributing to this bigger aspiration for the company. And that is, as you say, in internal marketing. So part of that is creating concepts like Pep Positive that structure the framework for everybody to operate within, make sure that we commit to those specific targets. Some of them, as you said, pretty ambitious, like being net net zero by 2040. That's a big commitment. Net positive water by 2030. So there are some big aspirations within those targets, and we need to take our people with us. That's why Pep Positive is relevant for us. It's relevant to tell our story externally to our investors, to our people in general.
Yeah. You've talked about the little known fact about PepsiCo is that you're an agricultural company. And I know that you've started your commitments by focusing on between 300 and 400 demonstration farms, working with farmers to adopt regenerative practices, and a lot more to be done to meet your targets. Can you just talk about supply chains and how you scale that important work across and beyond your supply chains in the next 8 years?
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier our scope 1, 2, 3. Our scope 1 is very small. Clearly, it's all about 2 and 3. It's almost 92% of our emissions are scope 2 and 3. So clearly, we need to get our house in order, and we will do that in our scope 1. But we need to impact or create a very positive transformation for our suppliers. In our case, our bottlers, very unique to our company, especially on the beverage side, not so much on the food side. And for that, we are using several processes. We just had our first sustainability summit with our key strategic suppliers. We're trying to move them to create their own roadmap to net zero, use science-based targets themselves to understand their operations in detail, and help them commit to those targets, because if we help them transform themselves, we're going to reduce PepsiCo's footprint as well. The other big entity at our end are our bottlers. Our bottlers are the people that, in the US, we are an operating company, the same we are in Russia, some big markets, but in many markets we use bottlers. So people that, they manufacture, they sell our beverage products, and they are a big part of our footprint as well, right? In terms of packaging use, in terms of transportation. We need to help them. We need to be catalysts of those transformations. But I always say to our people, our biggest asset is our brands. So if we can really impact and play a unique role in this transformation, is through our brands. Our brands, just to give you a sense of our scale, we sell about 1 billion units every day, right? 1 billion units. By unit, I mean a bottle of a drink, or a small bag of chips, or a portion of oats, or a gazpacho soup. I mean, this kind of a unit. We sell 1 billion a day, which is massive. You think about the opportunity we have to tell the story to consumers about a couple of unknowns. The biggest unknown I see with consumers today is they don't understand that the choices they make with their diets have an impact in the planet. I mean, that connection is not, obviously some people do know, but the majority of consumers don't get that connection. So they don't know, when they buy a bag of Lay's, what is the impact of Lay's, of that potato, from the way it is, grown, to the way it is cooked, to the way it is transported, to the packaging it used. They don't connect that to the planet. We have a unique role to play, I think, in first communication, and then giving them the information. That's why we're trying to create environmental labeling, and we have several partnerships working in that direction with consumer good forums and some other entities. There is some a massive consumer education that, if we manage to pivot the consumer into the right demand spaces, they will create the rest of the chain, right? They will move the rest of the chain. They will generate the positive impact we're trying to create. I think brands like Pepsi talking about recycling, or brands like Lipton or Pure Leaf, or Starbucks, some of our big brands talking about how consumers can help reduce the use of plastic. And obviously, if we reduce the use of plastic, we go to recycle, we use less fossil fuels. Now, I mean, that connection is not clear in consumers' minds, and that is we take it as our responsibility to educate. So it's our suppliers, our bottlers, but most importantly, the consumers, where we can have a massive impact. And the same with obviously all our colleagues in the large consumer good companies. And I talk to a lot of the CEOs. They're all very committed to this journey. I mean, that's something that it makes me feel very positive, because that was not the case 4 or 5 years ago. It is the case today. And I think that that's going to create a lot of traction in the industry for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you were definitely an easy interview, since you answered the question I was going to ask next, and which is about what I consider to be one of your greatest assets and superpowers, which is your reach to consumers. And you just gave some great examples of how you reach them. And you know, and I agree, that's one of the great opportunities in front of us. We've seen corporations, governments lead in this space. Consumers have not yet reached the point where we'd like them to be in making choices based on sustainability. Maybe in cars, not enough in food, and I think there's a real opportunity there.
Yeah.
Let me move to just one more topic, which is this: as we head into Glasgow, some people have asked me, why in the world are you going there? It's going to be a bunch of announcements. Well, it is the UN Climate Conference of Parties, which is UN speak for all the nations of the world coming together in a place to talk about a big issue and what they're collectively going to do to solve it. And there is an expectation that those governments won't just show up and have the same goals in light of the destruction of nature, the acceleration of climate change, that they're going to up their goals, up their commitments. But we're also going to see a lot of subnational actors, which is also UN speak for companies like PepsiCo and Walmart and many, many others, and states and cities that will be there, and civil society organizations like WWF. Can you talk about the role of business in engaging with governments on climate change, and in particular how Pepsi and other companies can better engage and work with governments to set the platform, create the stage for you and others to move even faster?
Yeah, I think, listen, as I was saying earlier, I'm optimistic on this process. And maybe compared to a few years ago, governments are pulling us into the discussions, right? So they are engaging with us to understand what are the problems to solve and how can they create the right policies to enable us to transform faster. So I see a level of dialogue that I didn't see in the past. The United Nations Food System Summit was a good example on how, specifically for food, right, we created some set of dialogues that help us, I think, create some platforms and coalitions of public and private to drive change at scale. I see the same with climate, and governments are, you know, and it's the EU for sure is creating the right dialogues. In the US, we're seeing the right dialogues. In China, in many countries around the world, in Mexico, in Brazil. So we're seeing dialogues happening between private and public. With respect to what can we help, or how can we help? I think we can help the government understand what are the ecosystems they need to create for us to make the transformation faster. And this is, again, I think the word ecosystem is critical, because not one single company can do this. This is, as you were talking about Walmart, I mean, they're our biggest customers. We're working a lot with Walmart because, you know, connecting PepsiCo and Walmart drives more value than PepsiCo alone, and the same with our suppliers. So, you know, this is about the full chain. There's a few areas where we're trying to engage the government more, and in particular, in our case, we want changes in agriculture, and I think moving to regenerative agriculture is critical for us to reduce our gas emissions. So we want them to help us create the right incentives for the farmers to change, right? Insurance policies, subsidies for the transition, training and knowledge. So there's a few areas in that space where the governments can create the right policies. If you think about the change to renewable energies, obviously that's a massive area. So and I think where governments can help is in pricing the externalities, helping create the right carbon pricing mechanisms, right? And make them standard and make them easy to use and credible. So that's a big bucket. In our case, packaging is critical for us to reduce our gas emissions, and we need much more recycling infrastructure. I mean, this is a journey, especially in the US. I think Europe has a better infrastructure and better deposit schemes or what they call extended producer responsibility schemes that we need that for the US, we need that for other markets around the world. So we're creating those platforms so we can really invest in recycling infrastructure and help the consumer, what is an inconvenient process for consumers, make it easy for them to do. And that really generates a lot of raw materials for us. So those are big buckets. We also trying, as I said earlier, we're trying to help talk to governments to help us create environmental labeling that is easy to use for consumers and is a standard around the world. Otherwise, imagine if we have to have one environmental labeling for France, one for Spain, one for Sweden, one for the US, one for Canada, one for Mexico. It's crazy, because we move things around or products made their way around multiple countries. So, those are big platforms where I think the dialogue, private, public, can make a big difference in enabling a much faster transformation rather than just putting, continuous roadblocks in the journey. So I'm positive. Hopefully, we leave Glasgow with a serious set of commitments to net zero by the largest markets. And I know there's still some dialogue there, and I'm sure there are a lot of internal battles in some of those markets, countries. But hopefully, we leave with that clear political commitment that will make it happen by the cities, by the large markets. I think the large corporations, we're mostly there in terms of, and our shareholders are asking us to do it, and we want to do it as leaders. So I think we have the momentum. We just need to take that political will and move forward. And the dialogues are there. The technologies are there, the funding. I mean, if you see the amount of funding that is coming into this space, the banks and all the private equity, everybody's moving into this space. They're willing to take the risk in those, scaling up new technologies and new solutions. So I'm very positive, but it's going to take political courage and clear leadership by politicians and by all of us in responsibility positions that we're going to have to, look at the long term and not so much at the short term.
Yeah.
And those tensions are, as we know, these are the ones that derail us normally.
I live in a world in which people sometimes mix up the word conversation and conservation, and you're right, these dialogues matter a lot, and what matters even more is execution. And we're already beginning to work with PepsiCo and your teams in many of the areas that you've talked about. And we have work to do also to work with governments to not just say the right words in venues like this, but then to follow through at home in all the many aspects that you talked about. So a lot of work for us to do ahead in Glasgow, but beyond, and a lot of work for us to do together. Ramon, thank you so much for your time this morning. And for your leadership in all those many areas. I do hope we'll get together in Glasgow and make plans to move the needle in some of those areas. And thanks again for your time and your leadership and the signals you're sending to governments and to your consumers. So
thank you very much, and thanks for giving me this platform to be able to talk to spread our mission. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon. Yeah, in Glasgow.
Okay, take care and safe travels.